Well, good evening. Good evening, I should say good morning. It's about 2 a.m. I'm at the Fair Center to finish the Messier Marathon, or as close as I can get to it. The good news is if I can't finish it, the later in the season we wait, the stuff that we're looking for tonight comes up earlier and earlier in the evening, and actually this stuff is up all night during the summertime. So what we miss, we can catch over the summer. And if you look at the image here, you see Arcturus. That's an image of Arcturus. Actually, it looks like it's got points on it. That's the tool I use to focus the image. If I zoom in on that, you see, if I zoom in, you'll see it's like a six-pointed star. And I use this to focus the image. It's a tool called a Batnoff mask, and it creates this big X that goes across, and then this one line that goes across the middle. And as I focus, that line across the middle moves from one side of the X to the other side of the X, and when it's right in the middle, that's when I know I have good focus. So looks like I got pretty good focus on Arcturus, and we'll get our Messier catalog out, and we will start to do our Messier Marathon, start to finish our Messier Marathon. When I left off, I was at M83, and it was down in the trees. We will try to first for M83. Let's do that. And we'll kick it right off here. So I'll go to my find. I'm going to M83. We'll find it. We will slew to it. Yes. Way down in the south. So it's still low. It may not. It's still low in the sky. So we'll give it a shot. I'll take a 1 minute exposure. And let's see what we get here for M83. Looks like I took a half a second exposure. It's there. It's there. So that's good news. We will take a 1 minute exposure now. Actually, I need to stop this. 60-second exposure. All right. And we'll be back to show you M83. So here we are back at M83. And not in the weeds this time, nice and high in the sky. So M83 is the southern pinwheel galaxy. I got at the edge of my image, so you can see the pinwheel effect with the arms kind of spinning around, arcing around very nice. Looks like a barred spiral galaxy. Very pretty galaxy down low. Again, we've got some tracking issues here, a little bit of spread on the stars. I put up one side of the domes as I'll be working mostly from the meridian and east, trying to cut down the wind, but it seems to be coming from the northwest, so I might still get a little bit of wind that'll affect us. But it's a good start to our finish of the Messier Marathon. I think we got about 70 of in, which gives us about 40 to finish, not quite, a little less than 40. So it won't be as long a marathon, if you will, or a second part of the marathon, only about half as long as the first half. So I start M83 to start us out. I don't see any cousins or brothers in this image. Maybe a little hint of a galaxy over here up in the corner, but not really. All right, so on to the next one. I'm going to see some summer highlights. We'll go to the Ring Nebula next. N57. Type that in, N57. Look for it. And that's higher in the sky, so we'll slew up there. The Ring. I don't know that I've looked at the Ring through this telescope. There you go. Yes. And 57. Still pretty low in the sky. Huh. I guess I could have waited a little bit later in the night. All right, I'll take a 1 minute image, and we'll be back. So here we are, 1 minute image of the Ring Nebula, pretty colorful. We're getting the Ring Nebula is a planetary nebula. Looks like I've got some artifacts on here. See a little loopy thing there. Interesting. So you'll see it's kind of multicolor, almost rainbow color, but I can explain some of this. If you're looking at this through an eyepiece with just your eye, you'll see just a smoke ring. It'll look like a white puff ring. But with the camera taking more light in than your eyes can, you can get some color in there. And you'll see like the blue-green in the center, that's the ionized ionized carbon and oxygen. And then the red on the outside is the ionizing hydrogen. And those are pretty true to color. And so it kind of gives it a rainbow effect, if you will. And it kind of looks like a rainbow, but really isn't. You're just seeing a couple of different colors there of green, blue, and red. And that's the ring. It's pretty easy to find up in the sky. You just look for Vega, the brightest star in the summer sky, way down low right now. But and then Vega is attached to a parallelogram, and at the bottom of the parallelogram is the Ring Nebula, not quite halfway between those two stars. You can see the names of those stars are Sheliak and Sulafat. And the Ring Nebula is pretty easy to find there. You just point your scope up there. Even a very modest telescope, a little 4-inch scope, can find the Ring Nebula. Very easy to spot. So one of the first things I look for in the summer night sky is the Ring Nebula. So fun to see that here in March, knowing that summer is coming. All right, on to the next one. So our next object is M56. It's also in Lyra. That's a globular cluster, about 33,000 light years away. It's it's kind of small actually compared to the other globular clusters we looked at last time. It's about 42 light years across. I'm curious as to how many stars we'll see in this little globular cluster. It's pretty far and about half the size in light years across of some of the other ones that we saw. So we're about 8 seconds away from M56. And there it is, center of our image here. So it is smaller from what I was saying, because it sounded like it might appear smaller. So a little dust glob there. And you'll notice, I don't know if you noticed that the images appear a little bit lighter. There's moonlight out right now for me, and that's definitely affecting the skies. The skies are not as transparent with the scattering the moonlight. It's going to give some effect of glow in my image. So, and I'm not doing any darks. We're just doing quick shots without subtracting any background stuff out or any flats or anything. So you can see the images are a little bit brighter. I mean, I could tease them a little bit to get a little darker using the histogram. But I don't want to clip any of what you can see. So globular cluster, also in Lyra, kind of at the bottom, if you can see the image of in the sky, it's kind of down below the parallelogram part of Lyra, kind of between Lyra and Albireo, almost halfway in between. If you want to look for this yourself, there's a nice little, it's about halfway between Albireo and Sulafat at the bottom of you go. Next up is a Insignis M29. Let's look for that. We'll type M29 in. And I'm going to zoom out here on the sky a bit. Now some of Cygnus may be low. Oops, where am I here? Gotta swing back around here. Cygnus is still a little bit low. Let me find it first. Let's see. Okay, we're flirting with the horizon again, so let's take an image of that. It's a, like I said, it's, this is an open cluster, so we'll give it, you don't need a whole lot of time. I'll do a 30-second image, and we'll be back shortly. All right, so here's our little open cluster. It is a little open cluster. There it is. It's just a, it looks like a handful of stars. I mean, I could probably count them. There's 5, 10, 20, maybe 30, 40 stars there in this little open cluster in Cygnus. It's 3,740 light years away. Its radius is about 5.5 light years, so about 11 light years across. Small little cluster of stars in Cygnus. I don't think it's one I really look for that often. So, but next in our series of Messier objects. All right, so now we're going to another open cluster called M39. So we'll type M39 in there. 29 to 39. And let's locate it. Let's see. Its declination is, right assumption is 20 hours, so it was. And 39, declination is 48. Alright, that's 21 hours. It's another hour. Well, I don't know that we got another hour. Let me see what it is. I don't want to push the scope in a place it won't go. So we will pause. Alright, my Sky software says we're not going to go much lower than we are now, so we'll head over to M39. In fact, we're headed just slightly higher than we are now. And we are on it. Because it's also an open cluster, we'll take another 30-second image and we'll be back with the results. Alright, M39. So this is much wider. It's also much closer. It's about 1,000 light years away. 4 times closer than the one we were just looking at, M29. So you can see it's kind of spread out here across the upper left part of the screen. This cluster of stars. So much closer than the open clusters we've been looking at before. Close by. All right. Next up is a planetary nebula. One of the most popular things to look for in the summertime is the Dumbbell Nebula. There's a little constellation up here in this triangle of the summer triangle called Vulpecula, the Fox, and the M27 is the Dumbbell Nebula. So that's where we'll head next. And this could be a really pretty image to get here. Very close by as far as planetary nebula go. And we're going to go low in the sky. I think we can catch it here. We're not, I think we're still above the trees. And so we'll slew over. I'm going to take a 1-minute image, and then we'll be back to look at it when it gets finished. Well, here we are after a minute, and if you saw my last episode, we know what trees look like when we get them in our image, and indeed we're in the trees. You can see that there's a little apple core looking thing over here. That's our target. but it's low on the horizon and there's trees in the way, so we're looking through a lot of air and trees to capture this guy. So we'll take a little break. We got a nice little start, but then we're still close to the horizon. And I'll have to wait for some of these other things to come up. So we'll be back. Well, our sheet is pushing us low to the horizon, so we're going to go a little out of order here. We'll have to come back and backtrack a bit. Let's move a little further south. We'll go towards Ophiuchus. There's a couple items there. Let's start with M107. Do that first. 107. Just through there. We're still awfully low on the horizon. Well, it's going up a bit now. And let me see. M107 is a loose globular cluster. We'll take a 30-second image of that, and we'll be back with that shortly. So here we go. And here we are back with M107. So its altitude is about 18 degrees. So it looks like we're okay as long as we stay higher, 18 degrees or higher. Let me see if I can't tease a little more detail out of this. I'll stretch this just a bit, darken the other stuff out. Let me see if I can squeeze that over a little bit. So it's a pretty little globular cluster. Got a little more detail out of that. M107 in Ophiuchus, a huge constellation in the summertime. It's the Ophiuchus is the 13th zodiac sign, if you will. Kind of sits right in the middle of that whole zodiac, and everybody ignored it for some reason. I don't know, maybe 13 was an unlucky number. Anyway, Ophiuchus. This is M107. So we see M10 should also be available there. So that's where we'll go next. I think that's actually about the same level as this is. So we'll find it. Up actually a little bit higher. So we'll slew over to M10. And then when we get there, we'll take a 30-second image. And we'll be back. So here's what I ended up with at M10, and it looks like I don't know. It looks like I missed it. I don't see it here. If I consult my star chart notes, M10 is about 7 magnitudes, so it should be bright. It's a globular cluster, 14,000 light years away, around 41. Light years across, 42 light years across. Interesting, I don't see it. But it's possible that I need to recalibrate, so we'll try that. We'll try this again. Come back to M10. Okay, so here we are at M10. Telescope lost its way for a little while here, so I had to kind of recalibrate on nearby objects and got it squared away with so it knows where it's at. And kind of in the upper right, we have centered M10 in Ophiuchus, a globular cluster about 14,000 light years away. Nice pretty globular cluster if we look at it. Very similar to M13 actually, in the way the stars are scattered. Very pretty globular cluster and a big star. Let me see if I can figure out what star that is that's close by. The name of that star, it doesn't have a name. At least in the sky it doesn't have a name. Let me see if I can check my other software. It'll tell me the name of that pretty little star next to M10. Yes, see, it says it's a double star. We don't resolve it here. That may explain why it's so bright. It's a double star down there. So M10. All right, on to M12, very close by. Let's do their live. Just above M10 is M12. Make sure that I'm looking right at it here. M12. Let's slew up there. And we'll take a 30-second image, and we'll see this globular cluster next. So here's M12, very similar looking. I don't have as much. I think I had a clearer image of M12. Yes, a little bit farther. So M10 was 14,000 light years. This is almost 16,000 light years. In a little smaller radius, 37 light years versus 41 for 10. So it's a little more compact, a little farther away. Looks a little more like a little pile of salt on a black piece of cardboard or something. So yeah, pretty. Stars are pretty nice looking. You can actually see some blue and red stars. So you got a nice mixture of star colors here in M12. That's a pretty looking cluster. I like that one. And hadn't been on my list of favorites, but I do like that one. It's got nice evenly distributed stars and lots of color there in those stars. M12. All right, on to M14, also in Ophiuchus. Let's go there next. Lower in the sky, off to M14. And we'll take a 30-second image. And here we have M14. So this is 30,000 light years, so roughly twice as far away as the last two we saw. It's 50 light years in radius, so it's about 25% wider. So there's a bigger cluster than the other ones, and the last two we saw, and it's much farther away. And you can see that it's actually a little denser. We don't get the individual stars as clearly as we did in the other one. It is farther away, but you kind of have a a smudge of white in the center of this, where the last one we could actually make out kind of blue and red stars in there. It's a little smudgier, but it is twice as far away, and we're talking light years, so it's a big distance, but it's a pretty cluster. Very pretty. Lots of globular clusters in Ophiuchus. All right, so the next one is also in Ophiuchus, M9. Let's slew over that one. And I guess not M9, not M09. Something like that. It's low. Let's see how low in the sky is. Should be okay. We slew over there. It's at 18 degrees of its declination. Looking for its altitude is 17 degrees, so I think we're going to be close to some stuff down there. Let's see. We'll take a 30-second image and be back. So here we have M9, also a globular cluster. A little bit closer than M14 and a little bit smaller in radius, 45 light years. And you can see it's a little more compact. I got a little bit of trailing going on here. So this is low to the horizon, but you can see it's very dense center here. And it definitely didn't track as well as I did in the last two. You can see a lot of stars here. It must be close to the Milky Way to see the whole background of stars here that you didn't see before. So nice little globular cluster. All right, on we go. Got some stuff with Scorpius and Ophiuchus. Let's see if it's up yet, and we'll see what our next stops are out of the Messier Marathon. Okay, we've slewed to M27, the dumbbell nebula. You just saw, before this image came up, that was about a tense, like a 1 second image of it. This is a 30-second image of the dumbbell nebula, and it looks almost rainbow-like, but really it's not rainbow-like. You're seeing really 2 or 3 colors. You're seeing blue and green and red. It looks almost like an apple core if I zoom right in on it. The blue-green, you can actually see it come out to the sides, left and right, a little bit. That's the carbon and oxygen ionized. And then the red is the hydrogen ionized. This is a nearby planetary nebula. Very pretty to see, about 1,300 light years away. It's about 1.5 light years across. I guess it kind of looks like a dumbbell. Maybe the middle is your handle, and then the red edges either side of the dumbbell. To me, it looks like an apple core. And a lot of planetary nebula look like an apple core. So pretty one. This is nice. This is one where you can get a lot of detail on with some time. Multiple images stacked up. It's fairly close by for a planetary nebula. A very favorite summertime object to find for me is the dumbbell nebula. It's in Sagitta. Actually, it's in Vulpecula. The Fox. Very pretty planetary. And we got a nice color image of it. Nearby in Sagitta, very close by, is M71. It's it's a loose globular cluster. It's funny it's called a globular. I have always thought of it as an open cluster, but we'll go over there and see, we'll reevaluate it. I don't want to go to 27, I want to find this one, and then I want to go to it. M71. We're headed there very quickly. We'll take a short image of that, and we'll be back. And here we have M71. As I said, this was a globular cluster. You could make a case either way. It could be a really tight open cluster or a loose globular cluster. I think it's listed as a loose globular. 21,000 light years away, around 30 light years across. Interesting looking globular cluster, M71, and that's in Sagitta, the arrow. Okay, looks like we've got a couple more down in Scorpius and Ophiuchus some more, and then we get into Sagittarius and some of the spectacular ones in the summertime in Sagittarius. So let me see where they are in the sky, and we'll make our next stops based on where they are. So we're on our way to M4 in Scorpius. We are there. This is a globular cluster. This is a tight one. It's right next to Arcturus. And in this field of view, I might catch Arcturus. And if I don't, I might try to do it anyway, although it might obscure the globular cluster. This is a tight globular cluster. Always look for it. It's just to the right, I believe, of Arcturus, or really, I said Arcturus. I meant Antares. Antares, yes, a red giant. How could I say Arcturus? Antares. Arcturus is up in the north. Antares is right down south. Here it is. Nice globular cluster right next to Antares. And I did not capture Antares in this. I'd have to move this all the way to one side of the image to get it. I'm not going to waste the time moving it around, but that's a pretty globular cluster too. In Scorpius. And Scorpius is definitely a summer object. We look for it low in the southern skies early in the southern evenings, or on the summer evening. Southern skies on summer evenings. So that's where we'll look for it. All right, there's another one in Scorpius called M80. Also a globular cluster. That's where we'll head next. I hope. We'll see where that is. Yep, it's a little higher actually. So we'll go to that next. M80, slewing up there. We'll do another 30-second image. We'll come back for that. So here's M80. You can see this is a really tight cluster, just a dot with a very condensed amount of stars in there. So let's compare this to some of the other ones we saw. So M80 is 32,000 light years away, around 38 light years in diameter. So a little farther away, similar in diameter. So this is just a very tight globular cluster. Stars are very close together, and it'd be interesting to hear what how some people feel these globulars form. You know, what makes some of them tighter than others, as far as their do they have a black hole in the center? Is it just, you know, maybe larger stars that are keeping this all together? Kind of interesting, because gravity, you know, mass attracts mass, so maybe these are larger stars. I don't know. It's all conjecture on my part. But a pretty little tight globular cluster down in Scorpius. All right, we've got a couple others in Ophiuchus, and then we go back to Scorpius. So let's go to M19. Let's see where that's at. Find it. That's right nearby. Interesting how that's considered Ophiuchus. It's very close by. Little slough over there. Maybe not. It's low. It's about 15 degrees. And hopefully that's not in the weeds down looking at trees, so we'll take an image of that. So here we have M19. It looks even brighter and even tighter than M4 did. In Ophiuchus, so this is almost 29,000 light years away, 70 light years in diameter, so double the width. This is a big cluster, and very dense. And zooming in, you can see a lot of just overlapping stars in the middle of it. But in an eyepiece, that would be pretty. That would be a very pretty cluster. M19 in Ophiuchus. We'll go to M62 next, a little bit closer, and about only 2/3 the size. So in the radius. Interesting to see. So we'll go to M19 next. What is M19? We're going to M62 next. 62. It's right below it. Where are we at? We're at, what's our altitude? Just want to make sure we can get there. We're 12 degrees. Well, this could be in the weeds. We'll give it a shot. And we'll give a 30-second image of this, so we'll be back. So here we are at M62, another tight globular clusters. It's interesting how these summer in Ophiuchus and Scorpius globulars are really bright and tight. Interesting. So this part of the sky is relatively close to the center of our galaxy, and I'm just speculating here that these are very tight globular clusters. Maybe that's how they survive, is they're really tight, because being close to the center of the galaxy is a lot more mass there that could rip them apart. But that's just conjecture. You know, maybe that's a grad student listening to this down the road and saying, "Oh, maybe we'll investigate this." That's just me. Interesting. Tight globular cluster, M62. All right, so we'll head over to Scorpius. Let's take a look at our chart here. So Scorpius we're kind of in Scorpius now. Let's look. It says Ophiuchus, but it's just I guess that's Ophiuchus's foot that kind of dips down into Scorpius. We'll go to M6, which is an open cluster, the butterfly cluster. This is a pretty cluster. Let me find it real fast. We'll find it. It's low. I'm really pressing the limits here. I'm at 12 degrees. This is at, as far as above the horizon. Where's my, as 7 degrees. Well, we'll see if the scope will go there. Worst that could happen is I'll be looking at the side of the dome. So we'll take a peek, see if we can catch M6, the butterfly cluster now. Otherwise, we'll come back to it. So here we have the butterfly cluster. As you can see on the upper left here, I did catch some trees. I might be at the edge of the trees by the east-southeast part of the field. So I'm not going to go lower than this. This is too low, really. So we'll stay above the 7 degrees. But here's the butterfly cluster. And if you look, you kind of look like you see antenna here. A couple of little antenna. And then big... let me do this. So yeah, you can see the antenna, and then you can see the big wings of the butterfly. But the antenna are very clear that help make that look like the butterfly cluster. Open cluster, about 1,600 light years away, about 6 light years in radius. Okay. Next one is M7. Let's see where that is. We're really low in the sky here. Oops. Let me see where am I here. Okay, that's where that's not what I wanted. Where's the M6? I'm all over the place here. On M6. That's not M6. Oh, my sky's all messed up here. Not sure what I did here. Too much information on this screen. M6. So that's too low. M7, let's see where that's at in relation to this. Probably close by. That's even lower. We're not going there yet. We can go higher though, and I think we can get to near Altair is M11, the wild duck cluster. That's a little higher. Wild duck is at 20 degrees, so yeah, that's an easy one to get to. We will slide over to the wild duck, take a look image of that. So the interesting thing about the wild duck is you don't actually see a duck, but if you imagine a flock of ducks flying in the sky, you might actually see like the V formation of ducks flying over there. So we'll give this a few seconds to come up. Here's the wild duck cluster. It's a little fuzzy here. I'm actually going to take a shorter image of this because it's a little blown out. You might see a little V formation here. And hard to imagine here. So I'm going to take a shorter image of this, and we'll come back to the wild duck. So here's the wild duck cluster. I took a 1 second image, and I get a little better resolution by doing that. And you can see it kind of looks like a V in space. And if you could imagine ducks flying in a V. In an eyepiece, it's not quite as blobby, these stars. It almost looks like 2 rows of V's, one inside the other, flying south for the wintertime. And there's the Henscher wild duck cluster from that one. The M11, always a popular spot to go during summertime. All right, so we're low in the sky yet. Let me see where we head from here. We got a couple that are low in Scorpius, don't know if Sagittarius is high enough yet, so there's that's where a lot of the next ones are coming from. We'll take a look and see what's there. Okay, so while we wait for the couple of open clusters in Scorpius to rise, it looks like we can get a couple things high in Sagittarius. So we'll look for let's see, M26 first. How high is that? M26. Find it. It's at 19 degrees. So let's start there. We'll start our tour of, it's actually very close to what we were just looking at. And M26 is an open cluster, so we'll take a shot of that and we'll be back. Actually, we'll take I've got a 1 second image. We won't even go away. Let's see what that looks like. So there it is. I'll take a little longer image. We'll do a 10-second image. Stay right here. Don't go anywhere. And we'll take a few seconds here. So there it is, kind of in the upper right-hand side there. Open cluster. Because it's all stars, we can take really short exposures. Whereas if it's farther out, we need to take longer. So a nice little open cluster there. You can see that the star field now versus what we were looking at earlier is much denser. We're looking right into the Milky Way. In fact, we're looking right into the heart of the Milky Way, right in the center. So there's a lot of stars between us and the center of the Milky Way, and we might even begin to start to see some dark lanes where cloud forming areas may start soon. There's just dust and gas that eventually will collapse and form stars or just kind of block our view of other stars. But this is about 5,000 light years away, about 11 light years across, M26, an open cluster in Sagittarius. So put the time in for this, just for reference sake. It's 4:29 in the morning on the 22nd. So we're quickly approaching morning, or dawn anyway. Let's go to a very popular one, M16. This is the Eagle Nebula. This will probably take a little more time, so we'll slew over there. Because this has star-forming areas in nebula, we're going to take a little longer exposure. So I will bring you back when we have that exposed. So here we have the Eagle Nebula. You notice a lot more color here than anything we've seen to date tonight. A lot of red over here on the right-hand side. If I zoom in, you might see the familiar shape of the Pillars of Creation, a famous Hubble image. You can see the towers here that dominate the Eagle Nebula, the core of the Eagle Nebula, Towers of Creation. This would be much better with stacked images, and actually I might have too much time on this. This might be better at a 30-second image with this telescope at f1.9, and because the stars are blown out. The stars are very bright, and it's overwhelming the nebula. So I'll take another short image, and I'll bring you back that image of the Eagle Nebula. Might be able to see the Towers of Creation a little bit better. So here's a 30-second image. I still have blown out stars. So you can see that this fast focal ratio is pretty helpful. I don't need to take a very long image at all to get this nebula in here. It actually looks a little better because there's not so much light blowing it out. I'll try one more, just for giggles. We'll see if a short image still captures this without the stars overblowing their pixels. So this is a 10-second image, and you can see we start to lose some color, so we're not catching as much of the ionized hydrogen, the red lights. Still have the Towers of Creation. The stars are still really bright. So that's where we're at. I'm going to have to consult how we do this because the stars are way too bright in that image, capturing it like this. It may be that this needs to be captured in a more narrow field where I can have a little more control over that. That's the Eagle Nebula. Next up is the Swan, probably my favorite of emission nebulas. Let me just double check where that's at real quick. We'll go to M17, the Swan Nebula or the Omega Nebula. That's right on top of it. So we'll slew over there, very close by. Most eyepieces aren't big enough to get these both in the same field of view. You probably have to have a really big eyepiece. So I'm going to do a 30-second image of the Swan. This is a very popular one to image. I always look for it when I'm observing in the summertime. This is the Swan Nebula. And we'll be back with that one. And here we have the Swan, or as Dave Bradley has told me, the schnoz. You can imagine this long, see the swan, you can see the swan is like floating on water here. There's his body, and then the little crook of his neck is up here. And that shows you the swan. There's actually a dark nebula that's blocking that makes it look like it's a swan's neck. But if you can imagine that dark nebula is a nostril, and this is the swan's neck is the edge of the nostril, then the body of the swan is the bridge of the nose all the way down here. So it almost looks more like a nose in space than it does a swan. But we caught it fortunately with this orientation. It looks like a swan. There's a lot of nebulosity. Look below the swan. There's a ton of nebulosity around there. We can capture a lot of that stuff with more time on this. This is actually pretty nice. Nice image of the Swan Nebula. And certainly this, subtracting out the darks and piling up the lights. We could actually make the stars a little smaller with a little processing as well. Would be a really nice image. And for a quick 30-second image, I'm pretty happy with the Swan Nebula. Summertime favorite emission nebula of mine. Right, M18 is next in Sagittarius. Let me see where that's at on the chart. Everything here is low on the horizon. I just want to make sure that I'm not too low. So it's right next to this, so it should be fine. And it's at altitude of 17 degrees, so we should be fine. M18. We'll take an image of that, and we'll be back with it. So M18 is an open cluster. You can kind of see it in the right center of the screen. Fairly diffuse open cluster. It's 4,200 light years away, a radius of about 26 light years, star forming area. So much like the, especially the Eagle Nebula and even the Swan Nebula, those are star forming regions inside those nebula. The reason they're glowing is there's stars forming there. And this is the result of what happens there. These stars eventually will blow off all the dust and gas from the nursery that it was born in. And you just see a cluster of stars here. So that's kind of a Eagle Nebula millennia later. And 18. All right, so next one is M24. Let's take a look at where that's at. It's a little bit higher. This is interesting. It's an open cluster. It's kind of a star patch in the Milky Way. We'll slide over there and take a look at what that is. And we'll take a 30-second image of that as well. So here's M24. Kind of interesting. It's like the whole right-hand side of the screen here is a star field, and then you'll notice that kind of in the center, as far as up and down, over to the right, it's like a little patch of spot that's a little a little more dense. In fact, it has a name all by itself as NGC 6603. This whole, that little patch is about 600 light years wide. Actually, the whole thing is about 600 light years wide. Interesting patch in the Milky Way. Here's the little NGC object. And it's in this big chunk of sky. If you look to the left, you actually can see some dark lanes over here. We're looking towards the center of our galaxy, and we expect to see some dark lanes between us and some of the stars in the center of the galaxy. You actually see it extinguishes stars. It's not like you can see stars through it other than through infrared light. Pretty cool. M24. Let's see where M25 is. Go to our software. M25 nearby. Slew over to it. It's another open cluster, and we'll be back with that image shortly. So here's M25. Looks like it's a lot closer star cluster. You can see these smattering of stars, but it takes up a good third or more of the image, kind of in the upper right part of the image. This star cluster is about 2,000 light years away, around 6.5 light years wide, but very apparently closer than some of the other ones we've been looking at of late as far as open clusters go. So the last one we looked at was about 10,000. This is only 2,000, so you can see the proximity is much closer than this one. Hence the stars look bigger, a little more scattered out than 25. Let's try M23, another open cluster in Sagittarius. That's our next stop on our Messier journey. As we look into the center of our galaxy, we have lots of star-forming areas between us and the center of the galaxy. We're kind of about halfway out on an arm. We're not on an arm. We're on a spur of an arm. And when we look to the center of the galaxy, we're actually looking through or towards a lot of stars, a lot of star-forming activity. And hence we have all these open clusters and sometimes some globular clusters between us in the center of the galaxy, even star-forming areas with emission nebulas and diffuse nebulas. And here we have M23, open cluster, about as far away as the last one. This is just about 2,050 light years away, a little bigger radius, so slightly farther away. Actually, you can almost see that it's a little farther away because the stars look a little bit closer together than the last one. Amazing what 50 light years will do, give or take. This is M23. Right. Now, we're going to have some showpiece objects coming up. Let me just see if they're available, and we'll plan our next couple of ones, next couple of Messier objects. All right, so we're off to, we're going to get close to some showpiece objects now. So we're going to M21, which actually might look like it's part of the next one, M20. I think they're right next to each other. We'll slid over there. We'll take an image of M21. Potentially we get M20 as well. M21 is an open cluster. M20 is the Trifid Nebula. It's a star-forming region. There's about 30 embryonic stars and 120 newborn stars that the Spitzer telescope has discovered in this cluster. In a moment, if it comes up together, you'll see why we call it the Trifid, and I'll explain how that looks to you. So, nope, they're not close to it. They're not. It's just off the screen. So what we're seeing here is the open cluster part of M21. And off to the side here is M20. So this is the open cluster part. That is about 3,900 light years away. And we will stay live and find M20. it almost looked like it didn't move. And maybe when we get M20, we'll see 21 next to it in the same field of view. We're taking a 30-second image of it, and I have a feeling we'll get both of these, M20 and 21, in the same field of view. As I recall, especially with the hyperstar, we can get both of them in the same field of view. We're about 7 seconds away. Maybe not in the same field of view. I guess not. Anyway, this is the Trifid Nebula. Very, very pretty and colorful. I'm going to zoom in. You see that there's blue in the lower part and there's red in the upper part. The Trifid comes from this dark lanes that seems to divide it into 3 pieces. There's a piece on top, a piece to the left, and a piece to the bottom. There's actually a little more dust lane than that. Star forming region, where hence all the red that you see there. You actually see the details around the edges of the clouds here where the stars are forming in the middle of this area. And all the red is ionized hydrogen, which tends to, when it releases that energy, is in the red spectrum. And then down below here is a reflection nebula. So stars back here behind this nebula are illuminating the dust and gas, and it looks bluish in color because that's the color of the star, or stars behind it. So this is a very pretty nebula, and with a longer image you can really pull out a lot of color, detail in the nebulosity here. I mean, I'm getting a little bit of it in the Trifid, but with longer imaging you can take some really nice stuff. You can actually see shadows and lights and light coming. You can see that it makes it dimensional with the light on one side and the dark on the other. Very pretty. The Trifid Nebula, a summer showpiece here at 4:50 in the morning on the 22nd. Pretty. And this is right near, it's right above the Lagoon Nebula. And we'll see how high the lagoon is. If the lagoon is high enough, we'll go there next. Lagoon is right below, and it's at 14 degrees, so it's high enough. Here we go. We'll go to the lagoon, and on our way, I'll take a 30-second image. I want to talk about the lagoon, so I'll keep you here as I talk about it. So the lagoon is another large star-forming area. When we looked at the Orion Nebula in the first part of the Messier Marathon, we saw that nebula where stars were forming. You can see all kinds of dust lanes and carved out areas that the stars are carved out. And this is very similar to that in the lagoon. It's much farther away. The lagoon is about 4,100 light years away. The Orion Nebula is about 13 to 1,400 light years away. So this is a little farther away, and here we have it, the lagoon. You can actually see the redness here. It kind of stretches from the bottom center to the top right, and you can see it almost looks like a lagoon. You have this little dark area here. It looks like a little swirly lagoon, and then to the left of the little swirly stuff is stars that have formed out of this nebula here. So very pretty image of the lagoon nebula. You can see that we can pull some detail out of here. I didn't get a lot, but I got enough to really demonstrate that you got a nice dark lane here, little dark globules over here, and then pink inside, pink and red inside where their stars are forming. Here's where hydrogen is being ionized. There's a little dust lane here. Pretty object to see through an eyepiece and to see an image of. This is a great one to do in a virtual marathon because you can get the color out of it that you may not see in life. And then there's a little object over here to the left of it. Let me identify that. Give me a second here. Let's see what that is. Go down to the lagoon. Cluster over here. Use an open cluster called NGC 6506. Pretty little open cluster next to the balloon. But a very nice, very pretty, very similar to the Orion Nebula emission nebula. You got all the emission from the hydrogen ionization and star forming area. Very pretty. Another summer showpiece. Next up is M28. M28 is a globular cluster in Sagittarius. We'll take an image of that next. We just slewed over to it. Move back to that image. So here's M28 on the right hand side of the screen, and you can see there's a star nearby in also in Sagittarius here. Let me see if I can find the name of that star. Consulting my software here. Keep forgetting the name of this. It's going to freeze up on me, unfortunately. Let's look over here. Caus Borealis, it looks like it might be. It's a pretty bright star. That's the top of the teapot. You can imagine that. Sagittarius is a teapot. That's the top star in the teapot. Right next to it is this globular cluster, M28. Kind of cool. All right, onward and forward. We're looking for M22. This is a really bright globular cluster. I hope it's not too low. I don't think it's that low. Let's just see. Yeah, right next door. Bright, bright, bright. One of the brightest globular clusters, so we'll take a short image of that. I'm not doing a really short image, do 10 seconds. So stick with me here while I image M22. It's easy to, even though it's really low in the sky, and because we're roughly at 42 degrees latitude, there it is, M22. Very, very bright globular cluster. And you can see it's not so dense that we get this white blob in the middle. You actually make out individual stars. Pretty pretty. One of the prettiest and brightest globular clusters in our sky in Sagittarius, so look for that. Definitely a telescope or a binocular object as well. Try to find an M22. Okay. Onward, and we got, let's see, M69. Let's see where that's at. I'm really flirting with the horizon here this whole time. It's a little bit higher, so let's go over there. Let's move to M69. That is also a globular cluster, so I'll do another short exposure. Stay with me. M69 is about 29,000 light years away. 22 was about 10,000 light years away. About the same radius. 29 might be the. That looks like trees. So I slewed to the left. Actually, I did slew down. I went down. That's in the trees, and that's at. Altitude, oh, that's low. Okay, that's why I did not pay attention to the altitude there. Wait, hang on. This is altitude is 6 degrees. Yeah, so that's too low. And we found it. So up here is fine. Down here is too low. Let's go. Let's go back to the ones in Scorpius that we missed. Try M6, M7. Let's see if those have improved at all. M6. Oops. M6 is at 10 degrees. Yeah, it's a little higher than we are now. Let's give it a shot. M6 is an open cluster. So this is the butterfly. Did I miss this? Did we look at the butterfly? We'll try it. We'll do a 10-second exposure there. M6, an open cluster, the butterfly cluster. I think we did look at the butterfly cluster. We'll look at another butterfly. Long enough where I don't remember. We did look at this because we saw the antenna sticking up in the butterfly cluster. I didn't mark it off on my list. Might be a little better image than we got before, but here's the antenna of the butterfly, and then you have the stars kind of make little wings out there as well. Very pretty in a eyepiece, the butterfly cluster. So we will move along. We did see that earlier. I just didn't record it. And M7 is Ptolemy's cluster. So this was found a long time ago. If Ptolemy found it, a little bit lower. This is at 7 degrees. It's still low, but you know it's in the southern sky now, so it's not really going to get much higher. Let's give it a shot. Possible we're going to get trees here. We'll give it a quick exposure to Ptolemy's cluster. Open cluster, 980 light years away, a radius of about 25 light years. Yeah, so it's kind of in the trees. You see the trees to the left. There's the cluster on the right. Ptolemy's cluster, pretty open. Almost looks like an hourglass if you think about it. Kind of pointed toward about 1 or 2 o'clock is the top, 7 o'clock is the bottom. It looks like a little bit of an hourglass. Ptolemy's cluster. Sagittarius, got a whole bunch more Sagittarius. Got a bad feeling we're not going to see anything in Aquarius because it's going to be the sunrise is going to block us. So, right, let's go to M69. At 6 degrees, that's too low. M70. That's too low. I think. M75 degrees. M54. Five degrees. Everything's low. Pegasus, Sagittarius. We'll just punch in a couple more numbers and we'll see where we're at. We might have to take a break here. That's below the horizon. 55. And 75 is at 3 degrees above the horizon. We are running out of space at the edge of our sky here. We can catch M15. This is a globular cluster. Yes, we'll find it. Let's see. There's M15. Not sure why we ended up. We're going to go all the way around. So we're going to do a meridian flip here to get M15. And then we're probably going to take a break. Maybe not. Interesting why that selection was done like that. So M15 is at 12 degrees. We'll take an image of that. This is a globular cluster, 33,000 light years away. Big radius. Big radius about 88 light years. So there it is. globular cluster M15. It's a pretty one. It almost looks like a big shell and a little shell, nicely spread out here. You know, kind of concentrated in the middle, but you can almost see a definition of an outer shell here of M15. Pretty globular cluster. And this is in Pegasus. So Pegasus is coming up. We've almost made a complete circle of the sky from when we started. All right, Aquarius is too low, Sagittarius is too low, so we'll pause here, and we might actually have to call it a day, but more to come. We'll figure out where we're headed next. So we're kind of in the home stretch here. Got a handful of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 or so left to finish this. We'll see if we can finish. This is M69 in Sagittarius. You can see trees over to the left of this. So it'll be a little challenging here to finish it up. This is an open cluster. Excuse me. This is a globular cluster, about 29,000 light years away. Radius of about 45 light years. Very tight glob. As I'm close to the horizon, I'm going to get more blurry images because I'm looking through a lot of atmosphere. So. It's actually a pretty good image for as close to the horizon as we are. Let me see where M70 is. It's actually a little bit lower, I believe. Slightly. It might even be in the tree there. So let's see what happens if we go over there. We'll take a 10-second image of that. It should come up pretty quickly. So we moved in that direction. So according to the image, you'll actually be moving towards the right side of the image because we're looking from the mirror. Maybe not. We're moving towards the left side. So there is M70. Lots of tree in the way there. But there's M70. In the muck. Lots of stars there because we're looking towards the center of the galaxy. But we're low on the horizon and near trees, so not a pretty sight. Go back to the sky. We'll see where M54 is. Where are you? A little bit higher up. Let's see if we can go over there and actually see something because we've moved it low to get M70. Take a 10-second. These are all open clusters, so we can take quick images of them. In the trees as well, another globular cluster in the trees. And the tree is giving us some really interesting interference here to make that look a little funkier than it would look like otherwise. And 55, that is real low as I recall. Target, and just rising now, so it's definitely in the trees at the altitude of 1 degree, so too low. M75 is the same way, I believe. Let's take a look. M75. It's at 5 degrees, maybe. Really, and the further north I go here, as I go in this direction, going north, I'm running into more trees. So we'll head over. But I suspect this will be completely obscured by trees. A couple of seconds. Nope, definitely low in the weeds. and some trees and lots of atmosphere, because you can see how the stars are all blurred. You can't even make any definition on this. It needs to rise a little higher. But as I started to say at the beginning of all the stuff we're looking for at the end of a Messier Marathon in March is stuff that is easy to find in the summertime. And so, I don't know, maybe we'll do a summertime makeup of the stuff that we miss at the end of the marathon. We'll call it a little Messier sprint, catch the end of this stuff. Because some of this is really pretty, especially we did see some of the highlights, the lagoon, the Trifid, the Swan Nebula, the Eagle Nebula. But when they're always low in our sky, even in the summertime, they're in the southern skies, low in the southern skies. So it could be slightly better, but not a tremendous amount better. But these are actually going to be a little bit higher in the sky. They'll be easier to find and get a little more definition out. So something like M75 will actually see some stars instead of this blob that we see here tonight. And we definitely found it, but it's a blob. It's definitely a blob. It's 5:20 in the morning. And I think we might be done. Let's look for M2. Sits at 6 degrees, even farther north. I'll give it a shot. I didn't go there yet. Hang on. So we're going to blur image. I'm going to slew over there. We're going to get a blurred image and then I'll go over there. Oh, I did take an image. Here we go. M2, 10 seconds, a globular cluster. These are all globs. There it is. Pretty. A little definition there. And all that modeling that you see are tree branches between us and what we're looking at. Again, low, low, low in the sky. That's actually an Aquarius. M72 and 73 are real low. They're down here above Capricorn, and then M30 is below Capricorn. It hasn't risen yet. So at this time, I'm going to call it a night. We missed 4 objects, all of which are just too low in the sky, and the sun will start to come up, and we're just not going to be able to catch them. Let me see. Yeah, M55 is not even up yet. So M55, M72, 73, and M30. We're 4 away from finishing. And 5:30 in the morning, 5:22 in the morning. And I think we're calling it a night. So hope you guys enjoyed it. And I would encourage you that all the stuff we looked at tonight is much easier to see in the summertime. So come on out and let's take a look at them together in the summertime. Enjoy. Thanks everyone. Have a great night.